Hi, I'm Sarah Jaquette Ray, and I'm Associate Professor of Environmental Studies at Humboldt State University in Arcata, California. And I'm going to answer Stephanie's question about how this current compounded moment of crises is affecting my work and my thinking in the way that the crisis moment calls for, in a kind of chaotic way. So, some of the ways that this moment is affecting my thinking are that I'm really excited about thinking more about the psychology of risk perception. I'd already been thinking about this quite a bit, but I think in this moment we have such an interesting new set of data points to think about how people come to perceive risk and what the psychology underlying that is. And I think we have a lot of work to do there. We can leverage that for all kinds of really effective purposes if we can understand that better. I'm also thinking about the role of the ecological imagination and how important this moment is, this sort of rupturous moment is for unleashing the imagination that so many of us have been kind of holding on to. And really, I think it's social change has felt to be in such a grip of really slow movement. And this moment of kind of rupturous social change is really exciting to think about how all of the long-term work that lots of people have been doing to get to this point is now kind of opening up the possibilities for what kind of new arrangements that we might be able to build out of this. And I'm watching this happen in, for example, a lot of the regenerative economy and mutual aid work that's happening around this and the sort of shattering of the myth of the individual. This is becoming kind of mainstreamed that we are not just individuals in this American society where that was the American dream before. I'm really enjoying watching some of these myths shatter. And how social change is happening right before our eyes around this. That sort of quickness of it gives us a lot of opportunity that I'm excited to see what happens and what unfolds. I'm also struck by the role of youth in all of this, their vision, their power, their energy. They're going to be the largest generation that is going to have a political force in the next few years. And I've been following and researching a lot about the demographics and the politics of youth in this moment, and they really get me excited. And so when I am feeling really despairing, I do look to thinking about what they're going to be bringing to the table and how they're reinventing and demanding things right now. I'm particularly struck by connections between COVID and climate change. Of course, people are making those arguments and seeing them everywhere, but I think if we push it a little bit further, we can see through the lens of the work of people like Julie Z and Lindsay Dillon and David Pello, the connection between the slow violence of structural racism and environmental injustice with things like the fast violence of police brutality. And I think David Pello presently argued about climate change long before COVID happened, that we're going to have to use the frame of health to help people really grasp climate change. And we're seeing right now that that's really happening and that's coming to pass. Access to healthcare, underlying conditions, the uneven impact of disease and pandemics, the vulnerability of certain bodies to police violence. These are all related to climate change, and I think we're starting to actually see that. That's really coming into more and more conversation. We have a long way to go. And I think that the freedom to breathe and the centrality of the lungs to all of these things is powerful and poetic and makes it something that we can really helps us visualize the connections between these things. I'm also really struck and excited about the ways that the labor of kinship, care, and emotional labor and social reproduction are all coming to the fore in conversations. Invisible labor is becoming more and more visible. The unequal relationships in nuclear heteronormative families is coming to the fore. The ways that we value teaching and other forms of social reproduction and healthcare are really becoming part of mainstream conversation and really pulling the veil back on inequality in American society. And I think that's pretty exciting. But I think in particular, the ways that young people are going to redefine what it means to be a family, what it means to be kin, how valuable care is in the world, care of each other is going to become more part of the dominant conversation as a real material thing that is valuable. And so I'm excited to see how we and how the next generation will reinvent kinship and care, what will take the place of the heteronormative nuclear family relation. And how will we integrate intergenerational care in that? I think that the disposability of the elderly in this moment is particularly interesting. And I think with COVID, that's really revealing that we're all sort of America as a society is happy to move along at the cost of the elderly. And I think that that's calling us to a new ethical conversation that in addition to the critique of the individual and the nuclear family are really valuable in this moment. I'm also finding this moment particularly painful, although I just shared some ideas I'm optimistic about and excited about. But of course, um, as everybody probably feels right now, this is pretty painful, and every day is a challenge, and the uncertainty of it is really anxiety producing and destabilizing. And even though I still have my health and my job, the underlying precarity of all of this for even the most privileged is creating this new era. And I think that can actually be good for shifting power relations. And I'm trying to keep my focus on what those new arrangements are going to look like and think about how we've been desiring that for so long. I'm finding also that my own mental health practices are more vital these days. I've picked up a more intense meditation routine, and I'm taking seriously, as a matter of daily practice, the advice that I lay out in my book. I'm valuing what J. Drew Lanham calls the intensification of the nearby. The birds in my backyard, I don't know if you've been seeing, but there's like hummingbirds in that tree, tons of them. That's why I'm recording out here. My daily chores, my kids, my dogs, my garden, and I'm trying to protect my mental health in ways that I never really had to before. Interior wisdom and emotional resilience seem not to be just matters of well being anymore. They are really forms of resistance and survival. And I think that that's really clear in this moment. When I wrote my new book, A Field Guide to Climate Anxiety, which outlines tools to cope with the existential challenges of climate change, I thought those tools would be helpful not only to strident climate justice folks, people like my students and colleagues, um, but COVID and the protests have revealed that our stamina for long-term advocacy is the most important resource to protect. Burning out is not an option. Falling into the rabbit hole of despair is not an option. In this moment, the planet and the world need us to have an abundance of care, energy, and imagination rather than scarcity, fear, and raging amygdalae. So in sum, I'm seeing in new lights connections between inequalities, the uniqueness of this moment, especially for youth, the political urgency of self-care, the fizzling of individualism and other dangerous myths. And because of these new perspectives and the kinds of work I'm seeing come out of places like Bifrost and this conference, I'm just excited to see how the environmental humanities is on the brink of having its day in the sun, and I'm really grateful to be part of it. Thank you.